Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Irish Goodbye podcast. Today, I'm joined by Brian Pennells. I've had the pleasure of working with Brian now for over 10 years, two different companies, two different continents. So, Brian, thank you for joining us today. Why don't you tell everybody a little about yourself?
Yeah, my pleasure, Carl. Thank you very much for having me. I have a large, fond affinity for the Irish, having lived over in Ireland for a year and having been where I got to know you, Carl. I've been, we've been working together now for several years. Obviously, starting our careers together out in Oracle in Dublin, in Ireland. What was that, around 2010, 2011, something like that?
I think it was 2011 I joined. Yeah.
And then,
field sales, and then
and I was at Oracle for nearly just over 6 years, in between Dublin, Ireland, London, and then New York. And then from there, I went on to work for a company called Zuora, another software company that does billing and revenue management. And then we've been working together at Salesforce for the last 4.5, nearly 5 years since I joined there.
Excellent. In case you weren't aware, the Irish Goodbye podcast it's a platform for people to talk about their careers without it coming from the C-suite, without it being a keynote speaker, without it being a CFO giving a strategy that's all the way up here. We want to talk about people like you who are in a role that they're crushing it in, who have built a career and who are proud of what they've done, but want to make the road easier for people coming behind them, or people who are Pyrrhic, who just have hit those mental blocks, who are trying to figure out what's the next step or what's the best way around something that's hurting them right now. So with that being said, is there any job or role that you've had on your journey here? Obviously, you said we worked at Oracle together, you worked at Zuora, and then we're both now at Salesforce. But is there any roles along the way that you've had that might shock people?
Yeah, in between leaving college, and obviously college in the UK and Ireland is slightly different from college as they understand it in the United States. It's the sort of equivalent of the last 2 years of high school that you would have here. So in between leaving college and going to university, I went to university in Leeds Metropolitan University in the UK, in England. I was always very interested in music. I love music, as you probably can tell from the background here with the Blue Note jazz albums that I've got on the wall behind me. I've always been a huge fan of music. I play music, sung in bands, various different bands over the years. But I had a role for about a year or so working as a record label, small independent record label manager in London. And at the time, there was all sorts of different tasks involved: managing the recording studio, working with the artists, sending out invoices, coordination, all sorts of different little projects and things that were going on. But it was a really interesting role, and it was a role that I had that was around music and musicians. So I very much enjoyed it. But one of the interesting things, and I think there's, as you're probably aware of, Carl, in a sales role or in business, you need to be able to get on with pretty much anybody, and you need to be able to talk to all sorts of different types of people from different backgrounds and in different roles and looking after different responsibilities and different products. And as much as it was an enjoyable experience to work in and around the music industry and with musicians, it really gave me a good grounding of talking to lots of different people from different backgrounds, different walks of life, people that honestly I would never have crossed paths with if I hadn't done something like that. And I think that foundation in some of those more formative years has helped give me an ability to just really talk to and get on with anybody, irrespective of their background. And I think, especially in a career like sales, you need to be able to, get on and talk with anybody, whether they're a very senior executive or someone that's sort of in the engine room, working on the operations of the technology that you're selling. I think that really helped me with that, and it helped me to be able to talk to people from all sorts of different walks of life. And then, as you said, Carl, we met in Ireland, so I lived in multiple different countries. I've lived in Ireland. Obviously lived in the UK. I spent some time in Montreal in Canada. I lived there for a year. And across all those different adventures and all those different places that I lived, it helped really sort of expand on that foundation that I got from that initial early stage in my career, and learn a lot about the world and different cultures and different histories, especially as we've often talked about, the history between the UK and Ireland. And it's been, that's been, a very interesting development, but just throughout my career, founded off some of that initial early stage working in the record label in London.
I must say, I agree with a couple of things you said there wholeheartedly. One of them being, like, as you said, you're working A&R in the music industry, having done stand-up comedy, just being in something that's creative and entirely out of the norm. It does put you at ease in uncomfortable positions, because when you get up to perform, you're uncomfortable by nature.
Yeah.
And being able to then travel and be in uncomfortable positions and be surrounded by people who have societally slightly different outlook to you, perhaps, or a different view on life or a different way of life, has really broadened my perspective and my horizons completely in my life. So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, and I think, Carl, you've lived in many different countries as well over the years, so you've probably got a similar experience on that front as well.
So with that, I think this next question plays into that really a little bit, is what belief or mindset you think has guided you through some of these tougher times, or whether it's living abroad, whether it's transitioning from one career to another? Is there a belief or a mindset or something about you that stayed true, that's helped you through that?
Yeah, I lost a parent when I was about 19 years old, and so as you can sort of imagine, that was quite a tough time for me. It was a tough time for my brother as well. But I think one of the things that guided me through that and has stayed with me was, you just have to get on with the job. You can't allow negativity to creep in. You can't allow yourself to, no matter how difficult or tough a situation is, it's unacceptable to feel sorry for yourself. You have to just get on. You have to keep putting one foot in front of the other, and you have to get the job done. And the way that I rationalized that event, that was quite early on in my life and my career, was that there's always someone that's in a worse position than you as well. So you can never allow yourself to be, you can't be too down or depressed by the situation, because no matter what situation you're in, there's always someone that's certainly worse off than you are. And I think I just approached it with that mindset, and you just get on with the job. And I think as you progress through your career, it's important to have that, just get on with the job, get it done. When I moved and lived in different countries, as we talked about, I didn't know anyone when I arrived there, but I got on with it. When I lived in Canada, for example, I went and took French classes, and I met people through French classes, and I found a band and played in a band. And you just have to go out and get on with things. Mm-hmm. And if you get on with it, things will good things will happen. And I think one of the most important things as well, and if you look through your career as well, I think especially in a sales career like we're in, there's a lot of ups and downs. There's a lot of fraught emotions as you go through complex deal cycles. You can invest sometimes a lot of time in things that don't always go your way, or there might be certain challenges with a product or a subset of products or whatever it might be. It's very, very important to not give in to negativity at any time in your career. And I observed this at one point in my career when the particular team that I was on was really down, really negative, and all they did was talk about the problems. And if you are constantly looking for problems, you're going to find problems. And so I said to myself, yeah, and I said
more. Just there was on that note, there's a phrase I heard years ago. Yeah, we do interrupt on this podcast because we should be having a beer, sit across from each other in a bar. But the phrase I heard before is, you are the sum total of the 5 closest people to you. So if 2 of those people are complaining all the time, you will complain 40% of the time.
That's right. Yeah. And on that point, and I did quite an interesting management course with Cornell University, as one of these online training courses. There was quite a bit of fluff in it. But one of the really interesting things that they said on that, and as you exactly point out, Carl, is that emotions, any emotion is contagious, but the easiest one to give into is negativity. And so at this point in my career, I hadn't taken the course at the time, but I remember thinking to myself, I'm not getting into this. I'm not doing it. And I separated myself from those people. And I said, I'm just going to focus on the positives. Everything's good. I'm going to get it done. And I was the most successful rep in the company that year because I just got on with it. I know all the others were complaining and miserable, and they're like, well, why is he doing it? Why is he, having this success? Because I just didn't accept that negativity. I looked at the opportunity and positives, and my career went in certainly in a different trajectory to those that were being negative and down.
And truthfully, that's why I have you as a guest on this podcast, is because I've worked with you for long enough to know that despite your obvious handicaps, that you're brilliant. Right? So
there are men.
They are. We're fraught with them as a pair of us. But a couple of things you said there. One about the not giving in is so key to me. And as an adult, the only thing you gather is responsibilities, and then you owe those responsibilities to the people or the things that you've gathered in your life, be it a partner, children, your family aging. You owe it to everyone around you, and not even less to your teams that you work with and to the people who employ you, to put your best self forward. And if you are sitting listening to people telling you, oh, this is awful, this is shit, it will drag you into a place where surviving is the only option as opposed to thriving. So I love that mindset, and it's one I've seen in you for a long time, and it's why I adore working with you so much.
Yeah, and I think the work environment is very stressful, and everyone has stress in their lives and across their different positions, and our customers have stress, and our peers that we work with have stress, but I think you've got to make the workplace, and Carl, this is something that I've observed you excelling at. You have to make it fun in the workplace, not silly or absurd, but you have to be able to have a good time. You have to be able to, enjoy what you're doing, and you have to be positive, because the opposite, obviously, to a negative contagion is positivity, and a rising tide will lift all boats. And if you are a positive person, and I've observed this with certain leadership, certainly on the Salesforce and MuleSoft side, they bring a really positive outlook to their interactions and to their engagements, and I think that lifts everyone on the team up to want to go on and want to work and do good work.
So that's a personality trait that people see, and that's a personality trait that, as you said, lifts everyone around you. But is there any particular personality traits you have that you think people don't see that have kept you moving forward, whether they're baby steps or long strides, but kept you moving forward?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Carl, that you say that. And I think one of the things that I really suffered from, and I didn't even realize probably what it was at the time, but early in my career, I had a lot of impostor syndrome, and I think the paradox to that, and the way that I think that manifests itself, and I think it's probably different for different people, but for me, it was a sense of never quite good enough. You were never quite clever enough. You weren't sort of deserving enough to be in
half an hour from being found out.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. I was still probably half an hour from being found out, but
yeah, 45 minutes now.
So that was something that very much affected me early on in my career, and I think that, and I say this to people, especially people younger in their careers, and I love mentoring people. I love helping people with their careers and helping them to advance and achieve their career goals. And I think paradoxically, some imposter syndrome can be a good thing in a way, because it keeps you striving and keeps you working and kind of keeps you hungry. And I remember after leaving university, you know, I probably made some career choices that weren't necessarily the best. And I was inspired by my younger brother, Jeff, who was working in the software industry. And I remember having a sort of lingering sensation of being in the position that I was in and feeling like, or knowing that I could be doing more, that I could be doing better, that I could be achieving more. And so, you know, I looked at certainly what Jeff was doing in the software industry and the success that he was having. And I said to myself, right, that's what I'm going to do. And the problem that presented itself to me at that time was I didn't have any experience. I didn't have any experience in software selling. But back to kind of our earlier point, I just kind of got on with it. So I just said, okay, well, I'm gonna keep going, and I'm gonna keep getting myself out there until I find someone that's willing to take a chance on me, because I believe that I'm capable. I don't have the experience, but I'm just gonna keep going until I can get there. And that's kind of what led me to us eventually meeting, actually, because eventually I had an interview with a gentleman called Mornay Hector in Oracle in Dublin in Ireland. And he was, he was my first boss that I had at Oracle, just a fantastic human being. And he was willing to take, he saw the potential, and he was willing to take a chance on me. And so I think, it comes, and so, over time, that sort of sense, and as you sort of have more success and you start to realize that the successes that you have, and you've I've seen you do this many times in your career, Carl. You take something that someone says, no, you can't do that, you'll never be able to do that, and you actually make it a reality and you deliver on it. And you have to, at those points, acknowledge the work that you've done, and give yourself every now and again a little pat on the back and say, yeah, you know what, you did that. You did that. You didn't do it entirely by yourself. There's always a team of people around you that's helping you with these successes and helping you get to these objectives. But you led the team, you marshaled all the right people, you brought the executives in at the right time, you negotiated this certain thing over here. And as you start to build on that, you start to get more, I think you start to get more confidence in your abilities, and slowly over time, that syndrome, imposter syndrome, kind of ebbed away a little bit. Still there a little bit, but I think a little bit is healthy. And I
think the way it gets replaced is, I would challenge you to say that it's not imposter syndrome now, but it's growth and humility, that it's not you alone, it's the team around you. But that as you walk into a room, you belong in that room to have that conversation. So the kind of the chip in your shoulder, or the anxiety goes away, but the confidence to know that it's not you alone is key. You replace it with humility. So one of the things you said there as well that I really, really admire is you saw something in your brother. Now, for the people who watching won't know, your brother is, one, your younger brother, and two, personality-wise, you're poles apart. And I love that, because you don't have to be like somebody to want to learn from them. I think that's a really powerful thing. Like, somebody can be very, very personality-wise, very polar opposite to you. But you can still see what they're doing and emulate aspects of their personality, of how they engage, and want to emulate that. So I love that you called Jeff out.
Yeah, and I really believe that you can learn something from everyone's got something to offer, and something you can learn, and something to tell you. And I think on that point as well, and just staying on the theme of your previous question, I had a leader that I work with over on the MuleSoft side, a guy named Glenn Johnson, who's a great leader, probably a great candidate for you to interview on this podcast, Carl. But he said something which has really resonated with me. As you do sort of start to grow in confidence, you're never as good or as bad as you think you are. And I sort of repeat that mantra because you have to, remember not to get too overconfident when you have success and not too despondent when you have failures. There's a line in one of my favorite poems is a poem called If by Rudyard Kipling, and that kind of dovetails into a line from that says, you have to be able to meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same.
Absolutely.
Kind of into that. So
yeah. With that, I think that does kind of dovetail into what I'm about to ask you is, if you were sitting here having a pint and you met your 25-year-old self, what would surprise them most about who you are now?
Yeah, I think that I thought about this, and I think they would be surprised about that I kind of got to where I got to, but also unsurprised as well, because I kind of remember at that age having that as we talked about earlier, having that lingering sense of doing what I was doing, and at the time I was working for like British Gas and doing door-to-door, sort of door-to-door selling, and just thinking, you know what, I can do more than this. I'm better than this. And I sort of knew that I was capable and could do it. I don't know if I'd realized, I think for me to be sitting here in the United States, nearly 20 years later, I think that would have been an enormous surprise. I don't think, whilst I knew I was going to go on and do something better, I didn't maybe think about how far I was going to be able to go, and all the traveling and all the wonderful experiences that I would have, and the luck to be able to live in this wonderful country. So I think that would
I do wonder on that very subject. And the reason I ask is, and it's not a question we had spoken about, but I'm going to put it to you anyway. I think about that too. Obviously, us both not being American and now living in America. I saw my dad when I was in my teens going to England to work. And him sort of, I guess, at the time didn't acknowledge it or recognize it, but he was showing me that the physical border I lived in wasn't the be all and end all of my career. And that I was able to come to the States and do well. I do remind him that he showed me that ambition, and he showed me that, the town you grew up in, or the county you lived in, or the country you were born to wasn't the be all and end all of your ability. And if there was somewhere that matched your ambition more, and I don't think there's anywhere more ambitious than America, if there's somewhere that matches your ambition more, that you go there and you put yourself in with the best of the best. And I know it's something that's leveraged on my mind speaking to my father as he gets older. But I wondered, was there somebody in your childhood, like your father or an uncle or an aunt, who sort of gave you that vision to think bigger than yourself, or is it a realization you came upon yourself?
No, I think, you're both fortunate to have, great dads, as parents. And, I think certainly, his take was always kind of, get out there, go travel, go and see what's out there. And, never pushed and said, well, you need to go and do this, or you must do that, or go and work here in this bank, or do this particular thing. And so, so from that, I kind of found my own path and my own way. And it was certainly not the road was not, in one direction. It went up and down and a bit all over the place with all the different things and all the different roles that I had. But ultimately, all of those different things, all those different experiences that you have, especially when you're younger, that you think, well, what, maybe what am I doing, or why am I doing this? They all add up and they all contribute. They all mean something, as long as you get something out of them.
I think couldn't agree more. With that being said, right, so some people see the delineation of business as what you do to provide your life. I personally don't. I think business and life intersect in more way than possible in terms of, and I think you do this very well. you give a little bit of yourself to your clients, to the conversations. It, makes it more human and makes it more personable. So in business and in life, what does it come down to? What is the underlying theme?
Yeah, I mean, I remember, Carl, you and I have worked together for many years. And I remember you had a conversation with me two or 3 years ago, I think it was now. And I remember it distinctly because you said, you know what, you do a great job in these meetings. You're buttoned up, you're prepared, but you're very formal. Just be yourself. And I really took that advice to heart. And I, try and, certainly try and bring a bit of authenticity to those meetings, because I think it's easy to fall into that sometimes fall into that formalized trap of business. And I think, trust is, for me, the most important thing in business. People have to be able to trust you. You have to, if you're going to do something, do what you said you're going to do when you said you were going to do it. It's as simple as that. And if you have made a statement that you're going to give someone a follow-up, and maybe you're delayed on your ability to do it, or whatever it might be, just drop them a note and say, I'm sorry, I can't get this to you now. When I said I was going to do it, it's going to take me a couple more days. Don't just let things linger or let things fester or fall off. So, I think, and I think more broadly, trust is the most important thing that you have, and trust is earned with your customers. And that's not necessarily from financial interactions with your customer. It's from the way that you show up every single day and how you help them to navigate the complexity, the complexities of the environment that they operate in. And that can come in the things that you do for them, and together can come in many different forms. But it really, I believe, comes down to trust and being yourself as well. Be authentic, be yourself. People will trust you more if you show up and you're authentic and genuine and come with your sort of true self.
I agree with you 100%. There's one of our leaders who uses the phrase, your say-do ratio should be a 1-to-1.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think that keeps you on point. So listen, we're coming to the end of this now. So first off, thank you very much. Appreciate the insights. I think you're not just a good person. You're a great professional. You're somebody who loves to give back, and somebody who loves, as you mentioned it earlier, you love to mentor and you love to offer advice. So the last question that we always have on the Irish Goodbye podcast is, what would you write in a bare napkin to leave behind for the next wave of people coming through? What piece of wisdom would you like to leave behind on the bar?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I appreciate the question, Carl, and thank you for the kind words as well. I think, and I've learned this the hard way, I think, in my career, but I would say follow your instinct. It's most often right. And secondly, there is no amount of money, there's no significance of title, no importance of position or reward that matters more than your integrity and your health. And so those would be the things that that would be what I would write on the beer mat for someone that's listening to this.
Brilliant. I mean, I couldn't have summed it up better. Brian, thank you for the time. Thank you for the insights, and thanks for the advice. And well, hopefully you'll be an avid watcher of the Irish Goodbye. But thank you for being on it with us and for sharing your thoughts.
Thanks, Carl. Appreciate it. Anytime. Thank you for organising it.